there's this guy. I guess he's pretty popular with some people. But anyway, he'll be singing, and this guy named Obama will be there, and it's just all this kind of stuff. So it's a huge event that's going on there. I'll be there for the week, but it'll be like a huge party for the whole week. But other than that, I'll be working on MBA class.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. Well, I think it's time to get started. So last night we talked about the spreadsheet and all the calculations, and we posted those. If everybody saw those out on Moodle, I guess the quick question is: does anybody have any questions on what we talked about last night? Right. So Frank Whitehouse put up a very good video, if you haven't seen it, on showing you exactly how to run that spreadsheet and calculate the ratios and so forth. Later, in a few weeks, we'll be working on interpreting those, right? So the point is now is calculating those ratios, the ROIs and the return on assets and all those things, and we'll get to all the interpretations of that a bit later in here. Okay.
One question on that. So we've completed our ratios for our team. And we used end of period rather than average. I mean, average, was a little bit more technical, but I thought I heard Dr. Whitehouse say that you could do end of period rather than the average. But in regards to projections, what are you like? Because we were looking at the K10 and looking at all the risks and looking at market conditions. What are you looking for in regards to projections for our? I mean, are you looking for formulated projections in regards to financials, ratios?
Oh, somebody's got kids going. If you hit your space bar or your bottom corner, you can mute your microphone. Somebody's got the note.
I think that's me. Sorry.
Is it? That's okay.
Henry, quit hitting your brother.
Yeah. It happens. What we're going to talk about with the projections is where you think the company's going to go, right? Which of the ratios are key and what do you think is going to happen in the future, right? So we're going to kind of cover that as a separate topic one night. But absolutely, that's where the art comes in, right? The science is calculating all those ratios, right? And of course, the stock market's all about figuring out what's going to happen in the future, right? So the tricky part is talking about the projection. So I think I'm going to hold off on that a little bit. We'll come back to that one because that's a big topic. How we're going to, what are the key points and what are we going to get to in that? I would like to remind everybody that when we were talking about these calculations, the spreadsheets, and the PowerPoints, it's your team of 3 has to turn in one copy, right, per 3. This is not an individual assignment, so you got to work on these together, and you turn them in at one at a time, or one per team, right, to the sheet, and we'll figure out just whoever turns it in. When we grade them, we'll go through them all and grade them together.
One question on that: Will we have some feedback on the ratios before we have to put together the PowerPoint?
Are we going to get to those? Well, the PowerPoint, actually, for now, the PowerPoint for the ratios are due. But you can go back and change them later. So when we start working on the projections, if you figured out you did one of the ratios wrong, it's perfectly okay to go back and update those.
Okay.
All right.
So for Monday night, we just have to have the PowerPoint on the ratios and initial stuff. That's what I'm saying. The ratios would be included, but we're not going to be graded on, I guess, content right there.
Right. Right. Yep. Just that you did them and turned them in, and also the 3 graphs, right? Pick 3 interesting trends out of those ratios that are changing over time and graph 3 of those, right? And then a little caption on the graph saying why you thought that was interesting or critical or why you thought that might be important. Okay. All right.
And one more question, Dr. Schindler, before we get into this. I noticed that the quiz schedule that's in Excel and the quiz schedule that's in BSG have 2 different dates. Which date do we go by?
I'll have to check. Professor Whitehouse made that. I'll have to double check with him. Right, so the quiz schedules don't agree. That's really easy to do when you're making multiple schedules here. I'll have to go back and check that one. Quiz schedules don't match. Okay. All right, and if it's causing confusion, we'll probably just open them to the later date and make sure everybody can get their things in on time. Okay. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about vision, mission, and objectives a little bit. Just kind of talk about chapter 2 a little bit and how that applies to Tesla. If I can get, let me see. I do like, one of the things I really like in management class, as an engineer, I never really figured out let's see, here's a little scratch board I can use, bring up. On page 10 of our book, when they talk about how things are valued, right? How you bring value, and strategy is about what are you going to do to compete in the market. And one of the things you need to do is to bring value to your customers. So in page 10 of the book, we have this graph that shows you have a cost. That's the C for cost, right? You have a cost line for your product or service, and then you have it's not a very good line. Then you have a price. My mouse isn't working so good here, right? And then somewhere above that is you have how much the customers value the thing they're buying, right? So if you're buying something like, I don't know, a dentist is filling a tooth, right? It costs the dentist a certain amount to fill your tooth, right? And then you pay somewhat of a price before that. But the question is, how much do you value that, right? So if you wake up in the morning and your face is on fire and you're really hurting and all, right, you're going to value getting your tooth repaired a lot, right? So the dentist tells you after insurance the cost is, I don't know, $125, and you feel like your head's going to explode, you think $125 is a pretty good deal. You, in fact, might value that at $1,000 or $2,000, $3,000. So you're quick to make the decision, yeah, that's a good buy for me, I'll go for it, right? You don't really care what the cost is to the dentist. You just care what the price is compared to your value, right? And that's what we talk about in business a lot, is the customers don't care about the cost. They just care about the price and the perceived value that brings them. And it's not just for the thing we're purchasing, it's the whole experience. So for instance, if I'm going to the dentist office, do they have parking for my car? How do I get there? How do I leave? How easy is it for them to file insurance? Just how long do I have to wait? Is the dentist reliable on time? Is he going to be on time when I get there, or am I going to have to wait 3 hours, right? All those are part of the experience. They're part of the price to me, right? The price I have to pay, right? So all that is part of it. So I like people to think of that when we talk about companies offering services and products, right? It's not just cost versus price, but it's perceived value of the customers. And I use the word perceived on purpose because some people might perceive something as a higher or lower value than others. For instance, some people don't like to drive American cars, right? So the perceived value of a Ford Focus or something might be a lot less than sort of a Honda Civic or something like that, right? Even though the cars might or might not be fairly comparable, depends on how you see it, right? And then to make this a little trickier, right? Everybody's a little different, right? So somebody's perceived value might be up here, somebody else's perceived value is down here, right? So what you end up with, a company is not dealing with one customer with homogeneous perceived values. You're dealing with a range of customers who might pay a different range of prices, right? And that's why you'll see, so for instance, when the new iPhones come out, the prices are higher, right? Because the first early adapters, right, they're willing to pay a higher price because part of their perceived value is to be first, right? So you start getting the pricing models and all of that. So I think it's kind of an interesting the way companies look at things, but it's interesting how the value changes across the different markets, and the price has to count in above that, right? And how cost is kind of disconnected from price, right? When you buy something, you don't really you don't really care so much what it costs the company to make it. All you care is what they're charging you in price, right? So when you talk about things in operations management class, where you're doing things like supply chain management, where you try to lower the cost with good supply chain management, then you can make a lot more of a margin, right? The difference between price and cost. And even if you can't increase the value, you can still increase the profits by lowering the cost, right? Of course, what you really want to do, right, is do both, right? You want to increase the value and you want to lower the cost. So if they increase the value, then I have my choice. All right, I can either attract more customers or I can raise the price and make more per unit, right? I just think, I don't know, as an engineer, when I got my MBA, I never really understood that until I was in basically a strategy class and had that explained to me. And I thought that kind of explains a lot of way things are done in the market. By the way, I was just talking to a used car salesman who I'm related to, one of my relatives, and he was explaining to me in the used car market, there's so many used cars, the price of since I use a 5-year-old Honda Civic is kind of fixed, right? If the car's in fairly comparable condition, there's lots of cars on the market, and with the internet, there's lots of, this cost of search is low. So they all kind of charge the same price for the same used car on the market, right? So if you're in the car business, how are you going to make more money? You can only be so good of a salesman and raise the perceived value of that car, so you can only increase the price just a little bit, right? $100, $200, something like that, just a little bit. So then how do you make your money, right? You make your money down here in that you try really hard to find cheaper cars, right? So that's where it's interesting. He was telling me that's where the car lots, they used to spend all their money pushing sales. Now they spend a lot more effort finding good deals for their cars so they can get this difference between price and cost, right? Is the way they work. Right? And it didn't used to be that way, but now that it's so easy to compare price of cars, you can't sell you only can only sell so much perceived value. So they have to push hard to find better deals on the cars, right? And so, of course, again, the idea is to do both, but you'll see companies push hard in both directions. Right? Software is kind of its different thing, right? When much of the cost is, the variable cost is very, very low, right? So it's just what you can convince them the perceived value is compared to price. All right, so let's get out of this. All right, so back to strategy and our vision and mission, right? So the book does a good job explaining the difference between mission and vision, right? What would you guys get out of that? We'll have a little 5 minutes of lecture here. What do you think is the difference between vision and mission? How would you succinctly put that? Right, those get mixed up all the time, right? Our book said probably half the companies get it wrong. So see if you can do better than a Fortune 500, right? What's the difference between vision and mission?
Vision is where you want to go. Mission is how you get there.
Yeah, sort of, right? Well, certainly vision is where you want to go, right? Mission is kind of your reason for existing, right? And it's more on the here and now, right? Our mission is what we're all about now, right? But our vision is where we want to go in the future, right? So they are different statements, and a lot of people definitely get it wrong, right? I always say that my favorite mission statement is Nike's old. In the book, they quote the new mission statement for Nike. My favorite mission statement of all time is Nike's old one. It was simply 2 words: crush Reebok, right? Does that tell you what to do if you're a manager at Nike? So if Reebok starts to make more than sneakers back in the 80s and they start making athletic apparel, what do you do if you're Nike?
Like the same, except
clearly you jump into their markets, right? Right? If you're beating them by 10% in market share, is that good enough? Not really, right? Stuart says no, right? What's the word crush imply, right? Crush, right? Right? Absolutely, right? They didn't say beat Reebok. Interesting, right? They said crush Reebok, right? Right? So I thought, right? And one of the things I like about, an organization should be able to quote its mission statement, right? Show of hands, who can quote their mission statement where they work? Got one? Okay, we got one, right?
Well, Centra puts it on the back of their badges, so that's not fair.
No, got it. That's one way to get there. We used to have little cards that were laying out on our desk too to try to get us to learn.
That's actually not true, Brian, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's close probably. So, and that's truly one of the problems with some mission statements. They're far too long, and they had a couple examples in the book. They try to be too inclusive, and if you don't know what the mission statement is and you're a manager trying to make decisions, if you don't have a general gist of what's in the mission statement, you're probably not using it to make your decisions. That's not to say you're making bad decisions, but you definitely can't attribute the mission statement to guiding the decisions of the organization, right? So one of the things you really need to focus on, I think, is boiling a mission statement down into something people can at least remember, at least get the gist of, right? Right. So, I teach it, right? And I couldn't sit here and quote Lynchburg College mission statement. Lauren's a employee, right? How you doing with the mission statement?
I could not tell you.
Yeah. There's lots of good stuff in there. Things you would expect. We're a liberal arts educator. We try to make citizens for the world. Leadership. There's a mention of training students for leadership is in there, right? So a lot of things are in there and things we do, right? But to tell you the truth, I would have I definitely couldn't quote it. I could get you probably 70% of the points in it, something like that, right? Which is pretty bad for somebody who teaches it in that organization, I think. So I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. And then vision's about where you want to go to, right? Lauren, do you know what ours is? Vision statement? Yeah, we don't have one.
No, I was going to say, now you're just making me look bad. I don't
know. No, not to pick on you, but I know you could take it. No, we don't have one, right? And that's not uncommon. A lot of companies have one or the other, but they don't have both, right? And as our book said, many of them who have both or have a vision, they don't understand the difference between them. They're incorrect. what they call a vision statement versus a mission statement, right? Which I thought that was kind of interesting. You go through all this trouble of planning sessions and take everybody away on a strategic retreat and that kind of stuff, and try to plan this kind of stuff, and then you don't have any. Then you don't even tell the difference between a vision and a mission statement. That's kind of interesting. Just so you know, though, when we get accredited, when Lynchburg College, when the School of Business gets accredited, one of the very first things they do is they pull out our School of Business mission statement, and then what are the objectives that come from that, and then are we gathering data to show we're meeting the objectives, right? That's one of the key things you do in an accreditation, right? The other thing is to make sure you have qualified people teaching the classes or whatever that means to your organization. But they actually do check. What is it you say you're trying to do? And then what's the evidence that you're doing it, right? And when I was in industry, we used to go through these ISO 9000 audits a lot, right? And that's exactly what you do there too, right? You have to write down what it is you're supposed to be doing and then show evidence that you're doing it, right? Which seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do if you're going to be spending millions of dollars in some type of organization doing something, right? Somebody should have a plan, and then there should be evidence that you're following the plan.
That's pharma.
What's that?
Pharmaceutical industry. It's CFR 2111. So everything that they for drug making, you document every process, and then whenever the FDA comes in to actually check everything, you have to show step-by-step procedures of how you're making the drug, and if you're off, you get basically fined or shut down.
Yeah. The process industries were the easiest ones to get this ISO 9000 certification because they do exactly that. So paper mills, steel mills, all those water treatment facilities, all those kind of places that are very process driven, they tend to document their processes very closely and then document the results of running those processes so that when an auditor comes in, they can show them exactly what happened, right? So they tend to do a good job of that. Less so for the service industries and places like that. You really got to make an effort. Okay. And then, so we talked about vision and mission, right? We'll talk about objectives for just a little bit here. And then the objectives are how are you gonna do that, right? So when I used to make cell phones for a living at Ericsson, we had a guy from corporate come in and tell us we were making probably at that time, I don't know, 16,000 cell phones a day, right? Cranking them out of what's now the Liberty facility up there where they bought the building. And we had a guy from corporate said, and every cell phone has 550 parts, right? Times 16,000 cell phones a day. So he came in there, his great idea was to set an objective for, we should have 0 defects. So we should never make a bad cell phone, which should be our objective, right? And I said, you know, these cell phones have 550 parts and we make 16,000 a day. And then just our normal 25 parts per million defect rate, we're going to end up with an X number of defects per day, right? That's only making 25 mistakes out of a million, right? So how would you suggest we get to 0 defects making this number of parts? And his response to me was, oh, that's for you guys to figure out. I'm just here to set the goals, right? I said, thanks. That's a lot of help. Why don't you go back to corporate and quit wasting our time, right? So objectives are there to support the mission statement, right? But they have to be achievable, right? They have to be feasible with the current technology and funding and those type things. That doesn't mean they have to be easy, but they have to be certainly in the realm of reality, which this guy, clearly wasn't. But I think it's interesting the way sometimes organizations, they kind of intermix goals and objectives, right? But certainly objectives are often seen as higher level ones to how you're going to meet the mission statement, right? Or take you to the vision, right? Whatever this vision is, how we're going to get there. So I think our case study at Tesla is an interesting one because they're all over the map in terms of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to go about it, and with the battery savings and the cars and the new cars and such. But I think it's a really interesting case from that standpoint, right? So what we're looking for on this case analysis, right, is for your team to find the vision statement, right, and then later you'll make a comment about it. Are they living up to that? Are they sort of document it for now, but then later make a comment on, are they living up to that, right? What are they going to do to achieve this vision? The mission statement, are they living up to their current mission that they're trying to do, right? The objectives, the objectives that they're working to, first of all, what their stated objectives they're working to, is that really what they're doing, right? Because that's not always true, right? And then second of all, do those objectives line up with the mission and vision statement, right? So is what they're saying what they're doing actually what they're doing, and is what they're planning on doing going to take them to where they want to go? Because that's not always the case with a lot of organizations. So that's kind of what we're looking for from from that standpoint. Right. So as we get further into the case, right, that's a good way to look back to when we start talking about projections and where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do. It's good to know what they claim they're trying to do. Then you can make references to that. All right. So for now, we really don't require any PowerPoints. We don't have an assignment to turn in PowerPoints for mission, vision, objective, right? But you should note those things, just sort of note those things when you do your case write-up, right? Those are excellent things to refer to, right? So anybody have any questions on that? Right. And again, a reminder, right? Those are all one per team, right? So as you start to build the background for this case, right? This is kind of key background to build what they're trying to do, particularly with Tesla, because they're kind of, again, they're covering a lot of ground here, right? They have more than one product. They have more than one industry they're in, right? There's a lot going on inside that company, both financially and from a strategy standpoint of what they're trying to do. Okay. All right, so those are my major comments I want to make about vision, mission, and objectives. I guess I should add a few things to objectives in my undergrad class. I always talk about objectives should be SMART, S-M-A-R-T, for an acronym, right? So objectives should be specific, right? No wishy-washy objectives. In the book, they quote the Hilton vision statement of, I don't know, spreading hospitality worldwide or something like that, right? And they said it's kind of a ridiculous vision. Right, so something should be specific, right? You should say exactly what it is you're trying to do, and M for SMART, and the M stands for measurable, right? Right. You should be able to measure this thing you're trying to do. Spread hospitality is not a measurable objective, right? You're going to have a customer satisfaction level of X measured by Y. That's measurable, right? It should be attainable, right? You shouldn't claim you can make 16,000 cell phones a day with 0 defects. It should be something that's possible. It might be a stretch goal, but should be possible, right? The R in SMART stands for relative, right? It should be something that matters to us, something that matters to our organization, something that matters to our mission statement, right? So it should not be something off to the side like we're going to reduce our carbon footprint if that's not part of our main business, right? And then the T is time. It should be in some time domain, right? When are we going to do this objective by, right? And as soon as possible doesn't count. Right? So if anybody's ever worked to objectives at work that say, I want this done as soon as possible, right? That absolutely means no meaning to me, right? Does that mean you want the fastest thing I can hand you in 2 minutes? Does that mean you need it by tomorrow morning? Does that mean you're going to have, get it half baked by tomorrow morning? Does that mean I have 2 weeks to work on this thing and do a better job, right? So any objective should have a time base. So for instance, if you're out to increase, you can say our objective is to capture 33% of the market share in this specific industry by the end of 2020, right? That's a pretty specific objective that you can measure up to. So at the end of 2020, you'll know, did we in fact achieve that objective or not, right? Or you can look along the way, where are we on the cake, right? All right, so objectives have to have some specific things put to them. Mostly, what is it we're trying to do? How is it we're measuring, and when are we going to do it by, right? Those things are key. If you don't have that in those, right, they're really not very good objectives. It's very difficult to tell whether you've even met them or not, right? And oh, by the way, I've been in a lot of organizations where they don't do any of that with their objectives, right? It's things like, we want you guys to save as most money as possible as soon as you can, right? That really doesn't tell you anything, right? So those aren't very helpful goals to work to, or objectives to work to. Okay. Anybody have any in their experiences about better goals or worse objectives, a way they spell them out? Anybody's got some personal references to those? Because we see, I see them all the time, right? I see really non-specific goals, and they're not measurable, and quite frankly, nobody ever looks at them again. Here's our goal for next year, and then the end of next year rolls around and nobody checks up on them, so it doesn't take you very far. So, all right. So that's kind of my inputs for chapter 2, right? And you could and those should be sort of rolled up into the case study as we get into that. All right. Any questions on that? All right. So chapter 3 is next week. We are going to meet. Let me check the schedule here. The 30th and the 31st. Right. Evaluating the external environment. Right. There's another quiz due. And it says it's due on the 5/29. I will check that quiz date with Dr. Whitehouse and see if we got any issues there. We'll schedule another Zoom meeting for next week. I'll let you know how my drive to Wyoming is going. No, actually, I'll be there by that point. Somebody's got the ice maker running. and or the margarita maker, maybe. I don't know. Okay. Any other questions, comments for me?
Hey, Lee, just real quick, that actually might be the fan in my house is what that is.
Okay, that's not a problem.
But so DuPont analysis is due tomorrow.
Yep.
Slides for mission, vision, and objectives is due on Sunday, I believe. And then
Is that what it said on the schedule? I forget.
I think so.
What he had on the schedule.
No,
Should be Monday for the slides.
Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jacob.
Monday for slides, right.
Okay. And so just to be clear, what we're putting in the slides for the strategic vision is what Tesla has in what their vision is,
right.
Not what we as consultants think the vision should be, correct?
Right. We're going to talk to that in the future, right. Yeah, what they have for now, right.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Yep. Hey, and if we do have any more questions about ratios, do we just need to reach out to Dr. Whitehouse?
Yeah, just email Dr. Whitehouse. He usually replies back to everybody, so everybody has the same information. Okay? All right,
So
good.
I'm looking at the schedule. Hold on, I'm looking at the schedule right now. On the 28th is Sunday. It's a PowerPoint and slides for section 1. Section 1 is.
Oh, that's just the ratios.
That's just the ratios.
Yes.
That's just the.
You're right.
That's just the. Yeah. And then so the vision, mission, and goals objectives is due the 31st.
You're right.
Which is what, Thursday, Friday, something like that. Thursday.
Something like that. Yeah, late next week. Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Thursday. Right.
All right. You just had almost a panic attack for me right there.
Sorry.
All right. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Good. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, that's it for me then. So I'm going to, and again, like always, right, we'll record. We have these recorded. We post them out to YouTube, and we put the link out on the Moodle page, and then we're good to go. All right. If anybody has any questions, just send them an email, and we'll handle them later. Otherwise, we'll see everybody next week. All right. Have a good night. Bye-bye.